Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the Apocalypse and the co-prophet of the end times. This is the second part in my series on Daniel chapter number 8, and I will be talking about the rise and fall of the Antichrist, as Daniel writes in the second part of his chapter. Now in part 1, we looked at World War III, as symbolized by a struggle between a ram and a goat. And remember, the two horns on the ram symbolized Britain and America, and the single horn on the goat symbolized Russia. Daniel continues relating his vision in verse number 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed exceedingly great. Now the near times fulfillment of this prophecy was Greece, and the goat symbolized Greece, but in the end times the goat symbolizes communism. And when he was grown, the great horn was broken. Now the horn for Greece was Alexander the Great, their first king, as the angel Gabriel explained to Daniel. But in the end times, the horn symbolizes Russia. And Russia will also be destroyed by World War III, just as her adversaries, Britain and America. And from it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. And now Gabriel explains the vision. Now whereas that being broken, four stood up for it. 4 kingdoms shall rise up out of the nation, but not with his power. Now this was fulfilled when Alexander's 4 generals divided the Greek Empire. But the end times interpretation is somewhat different, because the 4 winds of heaven means north, south, east, and west. And this does not mean that communism will have 4 divisions. It means that communism will rule the entire world. And in verse number 9, and out of one of them came forth a little horn. Now this little horn in the near time fulfillment was Antiochus Epiphanes. But in the end times this little horn is the Antichrist, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. Now this describes the expansion of Antiochus Epiphanes and the geographical areas that he expanded into. But in the end times, this describes the birthplace of the Antichrist, as I have explained in a video about Istanbul, Turkey. And in the latter time of their kingdom, now this means towards the end of the Persian kingdom, just before Rome took over the entire empire, but now in our time it means the second half of the Great Tribulation, when the transgressors are come to the full, in other words, it will be a very evil time, a king of shameless face and understanding dark sentences shall arise. This refers to both Antiochus Epiphanes, who persecuted the Jews, and also the Antichrist, who will persecute Christians. Now this term shameless face is quite interesting, because I have looked at quite a few other Bibles, and this word can be translated many different ways. For example, insolent, or stern-faced, or bold, or fierce countenance, or prideful, arrogant, stubborn, mean-looking. Now all of these terms are negative, but personally I think we should come up with a more positive term. I think bold is probably closest. Now the reason I think the Antichrist should be described in positive terms is because Isaiah describes Jesus in negative terms. Remember, Isaiah describes Jesus as despised and rejected by men. Jesus had no form or comeliness, and there is no beauty that we should desire him. And remember, Lucifer disguises himself as an angel of light, in other words, something positive. So now Daniel continues in verse number 10. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host, and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Now this refers to the cooperation of many of the Jews in high places who helped Antiochus Epiphanes in subduing Jerusalem. But in the end times it refers to many Christians who will aid the Antichrist. And Gabriel explains, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own force. Now I believe Antiochus Epiphanes was aided by the Romans, or at least allowed to prosper. But in the end times, not his own force means that the Antichrist will be aided by Satan himself. And he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall prosper, and succeed, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Now Antiochus Epiphanes waged war against the Jews in Jerusalem, but in the end times the holy people refers to Christianity. In verse number 11, and he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. Now Antiochus Epiphanes magnified himself to the chief priests of the Jews, and in the end times the Antichrist will magnify himself even to the prince of princes, and that is of course Jesus himself. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. Now the Jewish temple practiced animal sacrifice, and he took that away and substituted worship of a statue of Zeus. But in the end times, the sacrifice is taken away from the prince, and the prince is Jesus. And the only sacrifice he established was this symbolic sacrifice of the Lord's Supper. And that is what the Antichrist will take away from all Christian churches throughout the world. And the place of the sanctuary was cast down, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of sin, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Now Gabriel's explanation primarily refers to the Antichrist, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Of course that would refer to witchcraft. And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, that's of course Jesus himself, but he shall be broken without hand. The Antichrist will be destroyed by Jesus at Armageddon. In verse number 13, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, now these are two particular saints, and these saints are now going to explain the vision. They are taking over for Gabriel. And the two saints of the end times we know are Enoch and Elijah. And these are the two saints which Daniel is talking about here. How long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the sin of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So now we are talking about the abomination of desolation, which Jesus referred to in the Olivet Discourse. It is when this abomination occurs, and when the daily sacrifice is taken away from all Christian churches, that is when you must flee. And now this saint who gives the answer to the question of how long is the prophet Enoch, because he is asked the same question in chapter number 12 of Daniel, and also in the book of Revelation. And so the prophet Enoch explains how long the reign of the Antichrist will last. And he said to me, unto an evening and morning 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now this 2,300 days is a symbolic number, and it equals 1,150 full days. This is the same time that Enoch tells the prophet Daniel in chapter number 12, when he says it will be a time, times, and half a time. It's also the same time frame that the other angel tells Daniel in chapter number 12, 1,290 days. It's the same time frame that the prophet Enoch tells St. John in the book of Revelation that it will be without delay. Now Gabriel, when he explains this passage, adds very little. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. So Gabriel simply verifies what the saints have already told Daniel. Wherefore shut you up the vision, for it shall be for many days. So here we see Gabriel verifying what he said at the very beginning. And that is that this is an end times vision. That's what this term many days means. And when the angel says it will be shut up, that means it will not be revealed until the times we are in today. This vision of the ram and the goat is for those of us living today. In other words, the end times. So now Daniel completes his vision. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for some days. Afterwards I rose up and did the king's business. And I was astonished at the vision, and none understood it. Well, this is very interesting, this last phrase, that none understood it, because the angel has just totally explained the vision. So how can Daniel say that none understood it? This is in fact another verification that this is an end times prophecy, because that is the part of the prophecy that Daniel does not understand. The angel has explained the near-time fulfillment of the prophecy, but he did not explain the end times interpretation. That is left to us. And if you would like more information or a free copy of my book Revelation Unraveled, simply write to the address you see on your screen.